the death penalty cases. So right now, this one will probably be 2 weeks. Hi, this is Glenn Maurer, and I'm here today on the Next Step TVSB and our continuing fall season. Our guest today is going to be the Honorable Cathy Murillo, who's a City Council member from the City of Santa Barbara. And Cathy and I are going to talk about electing council members and mayors and political officials inside the City of Santa Barbara, which has become a controversial issue as the question of representation of minorities and neighborhood access to power and all these other aspects of how you select your representatives get into the issues. I want to remind you all that this show, like all others, will be available on Ustream at The Next Step TVSB, if you Google that, or YouTube, The Next Step TVSB. Remembering to add TVSB in both equations because that'll get you more quickly to the site, and you can look at this show and any other show we've done over the last couple of years that has been saved there. So thank you, Cathy, for being here.
You're welcome. I'm pleased to be here.
It's an honor for us. You've been elected now for 3 years. You've been on the council for 3 years, I believe.
I'm in my third year of my first term, and I do plan to run again.
Okay,
I'm
let's get
actually
that out of the way.
announcing it here on your show.
Well, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that'll carry the day for you. So,
Thank you.
Well, you got my vote. You had it last time, and my wife and I both have enjoyed your work.
Thank you.
But I want you to know that the last time when you ran, one of the issues that was sort of on the edge of the campaigns was the question of district elections. And I've talked to several candidates at the time, and everybody had sort of an ambivalent position. I noticed, I went back and refreshed myself on your campaign literature from that campaign. District election wasn't listed in your material, but I think you had a somewhat, what would say?
Wishy-washy?
No, well, I don't want to say it that way. I'd say complex
Right.
view. So what changed, or what has changed since that time?
District elections is brought up during every election of the Santa Barbara City Council, and that used to bother me because if you really wanted to, if a group really wanted to promote district elections, don't do it the year that we're having the City Council elections. Gather your signatures, build your support, build your case to the voters, and do it in one of the even years, right? Or don't just bring it up as a topic to throw around during a race. Really, if you really want to make it happen, make it happen. Just don't try to make the candidates sweat. But I can see both sides of the issue. But what's changed, to answer your question, is that the city of Santa Barbara has been sued.
Well, let's not go there yet.
Oh, okay, but that really is what's driving it now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, okay. But I appreciate the question. I mean, I think one of the reasons it's a legitimate question for city council members because the city council can vote to put this on the ballot for the voters to decide without the voters having to initiate a petition or something. The city council has changed it in the past. We're a charter city.
A charter city, so the voters have to approve.
The voters have to approve
that
change. And I think for those of you who may not understand what a charter city is, it just means the rules are more permanently etched in the documents of the city and change the governing rules.
There's a general law city
right.
and then a charter city. So there's some benefits to being a charter city. I think we have
more
a little
authority.
more autonomy, something like that.
But in Santa Barbara is, I think I figured I was 164 years or 165 years of being a city, and it's been both district elections. I think I had counted 76 years of an at-large for 88 years, so it's sort of 50-50 for those of us old enough to remember.
Oh, he did his research. I like it.
And I just wanted to, but it's been district elections since 1968. I found
At large, you mean?
I mean, I'm sorry, at large. So it's interesting. I certainly wasn't in Santa Barbara at the time, and I don't remember what the motives were for changing to at-large, and I'm not sure why it happened.
It was La Cumbra Plaza, from what I hear. I wasn't here either, but people were upset that the district representative of that area where La Cumbra Plaza went in didn't want it because his or her constituents, it was probably a him, didn't want the mall to go there, and then it went in, and I don't know how that translates into let's get rid of district elections, but that was the impetus from what I understand. Yeah.
Well, today, I mean, it's sort of the other way around in a way. A lot of the complaints I hear about at-large elections is it's hard to focus or narrow onto find one council member that represents your interest or your community or your neighborhood, and hold that person responsible for the things that happen or don't happen. And at the same time, we have a feeling, I think, among the critics of the at-large system that certain groups like the downtown organization or the Chamber of Commerce type groups have more influence in council than neighborhoods have. And so the money goes to places like the State Street Corridor and fancy curbs and sidewalks, whereas in local neighborhoods you don't have even sidewalks in some of the local neighborhoods. So I think there's a sense of frustration that maybe the at-large elections make the incumbent a little harder to pin down. Is that ring at all true for you?
To me, there's two arguments for district elections. One is the neighborhoods need better direct representation, and two, we don't have enough people of color on the Santa Barbara City Council. So when the city of San Francisco, which is kind of a city-county, they have a weird government over there. But when they went to district elections, it did result in more minorities.
They also have
people of color.
They also have cumulative voting type of elections,
which is terribly interesting.
Yeah, we can't. It's too complicated to get into it now, but it does create I think it does create a much more democratic system, because you can't just overwhelm one group on one ballot. They get their rebound, so to speak. But let's not get into that.
But in terms of the neighborhoods, what I heard more, rather than money going to the downtown, is that there's more affluent neighborhoods that get more attention, and then the working class neighborhoods don't.
Yeah, I think that's. I mean, versions of the same thing. That I think the frustration, the hope for reform would be if you had district elections. Like the hope for reform, and I'm not saying it would happen, but the hope for reform is you would have a person in your community who's beholden to a smaller group of population,
right,
represents the economic and demographic nature of that population, and takes care of that neighborhood. Now, some people call that cronyism or old politics, boss tweed politics or something, but it would maybe get a sidewalk bill or another thing done in a neighborhood that's not getting attended to now.
But the positive part of district elections is that the elected official really gets to know that area.
Absolutely.
The sidewalks,
yeah.
The businesses, the residents, the issues, the
Absolutely.
Challenges, and then the residents themselves have a person to go to that is directly responsible to them. And so I think this court case is going to nudge us to district elections. And so I'm trying to look on the bright side and really embrace what good will come out of district elections. I hope it does result in more, well, because I'm a progressive person and an elected official, liberal, thank you. I do hope it results in more liberal people getting
right.
elected, and more working people. See, that's another
right.
great argument for district elections, is it's easier to get elected in a smaller zone. You don't have to raise as much money.
Right.
I'm somebody who went door to door, and so I would go door to door in a smaller district. You could cover more ground, perhaps, but a working person, because it's easier, a working person could do it.
Right.
Because right now, I took 3 months leave of absence from my job at KCSB Radio. Hey, KCSB, a little shout out. But not everybody can do that. But once you're in, we get
right.
paid about $45,000 a year. So it's a living wage. I'm not sure if you knew that.
No, well,
City Council.
I know the City Council gets paid what I consider a modest wage. I know there are people complain about even the $45,000, but it certainly would be enough to attract more, somebody who needs
Right.
a salary to support themselves and their family.
Glenn, there are a lot of people in Santa Barbara who live on less
Absolutely.
than 45,000 a year.
I know they do.
Yeah, so it's about 40 a year, and then we get a car allowance, which is just money on top of it. So it's about 45, 46.
Yeah, well, let's repeat a little bit of what you were just saying, because I think this is important for people to understand the benefits of districts. We have a population of 90 to 100,000 in the city of Santa Barbara.
It's about 90, yeah.
Right. So if you had 6 districts, you'd have about 15,000
15,000
per
it is,
person.
yeah.
So one politician or a group of politicians would run with a constituency of 15,000, which is, well, not, 1/6 of the population they're now trying to attract.
So half the people in the city are registered voters, so you could just assume that half of those 15 are registered to vote, but probably in certain areas there's better voter registration than
absolutely.
others. And I'm a real advocate for voter registration and voter engagement, especially if you're trying to get progressive people or Latinos elected. That would be a whole other half an hour on your show.
But as you mentioned,
Waking up the Latino electorate.
so if you have a geographically described neighborhood that you're running in,
Yeah.
as you say, you can walk the neighborhood, you can know the community. If you grew up there, you probably already know the community.
Yeah.
Maybe they know you. And so it does seem to me like it has, as you can tell, I'm in favor, if it hasn't been clear already,
good.
of district elections, and have been for 20 years. I'd like to see it happen again and see what happens. If it goes bad, if we have some boss politics or bad things happen, that'd be too bad, but I don't think it would. This is a sophisticated community. I don't think that's likely to happen.
I hope so. And the one danger of district elections about it being easier to get elected, so what if someone who didn't have good motives came up? Somebody
Right.
who was driven by ego, or somebody
Well, there's
who...
always a politician who's driven by ego.
Well,
Some politicians.
I admit that I have ego. I'm just saying...
I didn't mean you.
But if you talk to people, so, you sometimes meet politicians and they're in it because they want to puff themselves up, or they're trying to do favors for their business
Right.
friends or something. And so I do hope that the electorate is sophisticated, as you say, and really, if it's their vote is going to count so much more in district elections because it's a smaller zone. Yeah,
Well,
choose the right person by all
and
means.
along the lines of what you're saying there, I think you probably have a lot more candidates since it's more affordable to run.
You would have more, yeah, there you go.
So you'd have more candidates, and hopefully, amongst a larger number of candidates, the voters would be able to choose, not amongst one evil or another evil. They could find something that more represents themselves.
Yeah.
And none of what I'm saying is directed at you, Cathy. I want you to know that.
That's okay.
So let's go back and talk about this litigation, because the nature of the lawsuit that the city has been served with, and the point of the lawsuit is to force the city to create better representation for Latino minority.
Right. Well,
I mean, that's specifically what it's about.
It's kind of a large group, and some of them have different motivations. And so, for instance, one person says he doesn't care if it's Latinos who get elected. He just wants to see someone from the neighborhood who's going to pay attention to that neighborhood.
Well, that's my feeling.
Okay, and exactly, and more specifically, the neighborhoods that have been ignored, according to this guy. And then someone else will say, no, I'm in it to have more Latinos on it.
Well, I think the nature of the lawsuit itself is under the California Civil Rights
California
Voting Rights Act.
Voting Rights Act, yeah.
And the lawsuit itself claims, the lawyers that filed the lawsuit on behalf of their plaintiffs claim that the present system diminishes the Latino vote by overwhelming they point out there's 38% Latino population in Santa Barbara City,
Right.
and hardly nobody in the last 20 years of Latino ancestry or heritage has been elected to the council. And the idea is that how that works, just to make sure the voters understand the argument, it's like a reverse gerrymandering. If you've got 80%, let's say you got 40% Latino and 60% white, that 60% white could theoretically outweigh the 40% Latino for every office being run.
Right.
Whereas if it was a neighborhood election, there's a chance that neighborhood or one of the neighborhoods would be heavily Latino, and they would actually get a representation out of that neighborhood. So that's the argument.
That's the argument.
And, but the question is, so we have 38% Latino population in the city of Santa Barbara, but we know that they don't vote at 38% of the vote.
Right, and that's another challenge that I refer to. But why don't they vote? And maybe because they don't see people like themselves in office. So it's kind of a circle, right? Where I'm hoping that I inspire people to see that I've done a good job and I've looked out for the East Side. I speak some Spanish. I'm working on my Spanish. I think it's terribly important, to be able to rap with people. We need to get people engaged. And then, but if they look at the city council and it's always the same kind of people, wealthy, retired people, of course, they're not going to feel connected to their city council. So there's a lot of factors in there.
We don't know, just was thinking about what you're saying, and we don't know what I could not find any evidence of the history of turnout when there were district elections versus the present
I don't know.
several years, so I don't know if it would have been different back in the 60s or 40s or 20s if there was a larger turnout by district. But I know that the turnout now is variable depending on the election year cycle.
We went to mail-in ballot.
Which I loved. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
I encourage that.
And so the first year it was almost 50%, and then it went to 40, somewhere in there, which isn't bad.
No.
But for
the
purposes of the lawsuit, what the question is, does the city of Santa Barbara, have racially polarized voting? So
I'm curious what that means.
We've hired a demographer. He's an expert in demographics. And so what he's looking at is he's identifying what they call a Latino preferred candidate. So this is a candidate that Latinos would vote for. And then the question is, who voted for that candidate? Was it just Latinos or was it non-Latinos? And so I assume he's looking at my election, and then we've had a couple of other Spanish surname people. Megan Diaz-Ali was a great candidate in 2013. She did not get in.
Got my vote.
Yeah, me too. and he'll be looking at her and where she had support. But the threshold to prove that there's racially polarized voting is very low, and where in other cities where people have brought these suits under the California Voting Rights Act, they prevail. And so that's why I'm getting prepared to go to district elections, because I think we're going to be forced to do it, and I think we need to do it right. I think we need an independent commission, so not the city council, because people would accuse us of being having our own interest at heart. Okay, of course. So an independent commission would be made of retired judges or some college professors and people from the community, right, who've done some activism that can be trusted. And so you find trustworthy people and you put them together, and then they draw the lines. Of interest, do you ever eat at the Cajun Kitchen on De La Vina?
Of course.
On the wall is a map of district elections, and I think it's from the 60s.
Oh, really?
So, and obviously the population was different, and fewer people, and so there's probably more people in the Upper State Street area. The city boundaries go all the way to 154. You know that, and so there's the Mesa, and so it would be interesting to see a GPS, sort of, or GIS, whatever that word is, where someone has figured out just divide it into 15,000. So it's what the plaintiffs are asking for is 6 districts and then the mayor elected at large.
Right. Right now.
So 6 districts of 15,000, what would that look like? I'm dying to know.
Let's make sure that the audience remembers, we sort of assume some of these things. We do have a mayor and we do have council members. The mayor has been elected at large always and would be continued, obviously, be elected at large. The question is only about where the council members would they represent geographically identified districts, or would they be elected at large just now? And you mentioned the north side, or the fact that it goes to west.
The north side, that's what people call that area.
Yeah, I lived up there for years, and I will tell you that it was unknown to downtown politicians. There was almost no sense that any politician would come to, I had a homeowners association, or, we had more involvement by far from local school board members and other elected officials than the cemetery district, than any Santa Barbara politician. I was amazed. When I moved downtown again, you're much more embroiled in the day-to-day politics. And I think that's the essence of what's going on, is there's this focus, perceived focus, by the politicians and the political establishment and economic interests of downtown Santa Barbara, which they identify as being Santa Barbara. And they don't really identify other parts of Santa Barbara as being part of the city. So that's part of the frustration. You mentioned other cities have been involved in this, and I just would go through a little list of some. Anaheim, city of Anaheim, changed from at-large to district elections because of lawsuits and threats of litigation. Modesto, another one. Compton, a black community was accused of denying the Hispanic community, the Latino community in Compton,
well, that's interesting.
Of its of participation. So it's not black and white, and it's not black and brown, and it's not. It's power. It's people who have power don't want to give it up sometimes. Escondido, Whittier, and then Palmdale was sued, and they actually went to court and lost. They're appealing, and the mayor of Palmdale said something which I thought was of interest, and we might want to talk about that in the few moments we have left. He said that he blamed all of these litigations on greedy lawyers. Now, we do have a rather famous lawyer who has brought the lawsuit against the city of Santa Barbara, and I wonder if the city has any concept of whether there's an economic incentive of any kind for the litigants. Is there any economic incentive that you know of? Because I've been told if the city loses in trial, the lawyers may benefit.
Oh, we will have to pay the attorney's fees.
Well, that would be always
and
true.
the legal expert fees, and some of them have been estimated at $1 million.
My goodness.
So I wish that these folks promoting district elections had collected signatures and done an old-fashioned grassroots campaign where they put it on the ballot and they worked hard to get it passed. But they've taken this legal action, and it's not for me to say if the attorney is doing it to make money, but he will get money. He will get his attorney's fees paid through this. So I'm trying to focus more on how do we get Latinos elected? You know, maybe we need to cultivate candidates who are electable, who I came from journalism, so I presented myself as someone who had studied the issues. I wrote many, many stories on water supply, and here we are in the middle of one of the worst droughts in recorded history. And so I'm, proud to say that I bring some background to that. People who run, especially women and Latinos, we really have to make sure that we let the voters know we're looking out for neighborhoods, we've done our homework, we're trustworthy. And do you see what I'm saying?
Of course I do.
We need good Latino candidates.
Well, I mean, if we look at the city of Santa Barbara, I've been here since 1975, and one of the things I've noticed about Santa Barbara from the time I got here was that women were in positions of power, and increasingly in positions of power in the city, because they've established their bona fides, they've established their knowledge and talent and credibility with the elected community, and they've remained a significant player. If you want to just divide between men and women, women are a significant player in this part of the county of Santa Barbara and the city of Santa Barbara.
And some of us believe more women should be in political office.
I'm not saying they should.
There's only 2 of us on the city council right now.
Right now, but
I think there's a gender imbalance there.
Right now there is, but it may change in the past. I mean, in the future. But the point, I think I was trying to pick up on your idea that by becoming, if Latino candidates or minority candidates become more visible as competent in other areas besides just being the Latino candidate.
Oh, right. Yeah, of course.
So you mentioned you had your background, your skills, the work you did on water, the work you did in other fields made you a more credible candidate. I know when I voted for you, I didn't vote for you per se because you were Latino, a Latina. I voted for you because I thought you were the competent person running for office that I had trust in. And I think that's what we're trying to say.
Well, can I jump in and talk about
Go ahead.
year elections?
Yes, let's
because
talk
in
about
some
that.
of those court cases that you were mentioning, the courts also forced those cities to go from odd year elections to even year. So what is on the ballot in even years, Glenn? The gubernatorial races, the presidential election. The presidential election sometimes 80 to 85% of registered voters come out and vote. And Santa Barbara, I don't like it that we have odd year elections. Even though I was elected in an odd year at-large system, I'm ready for a change. And I don't think even year elections is on the table right now. But wouldn't it be nice to have 80% of our registered voters come out and decide who's on the council? Some people are talking about it, so we'll see.
Yeah, it was an issue a few years back when the city tried, I think they had it on the ballot, to change the election dates.
2007, yeah.
And there were two things. One thing they did do, which, and at the time I thought they didn't need to, they were complaining about the cost of running elections. They wanted to consolidate elections in order to save costs, was the theory. But what they did was...
That's a good idea, too.
But what they did was they did it by mail, and they saved a whole lot more cost.
Right.
So in terms of saving cost, they did that. I think the people who criticize having the election at the same time as these other more visible elections is that they will be submerged and the attention won't be paid to the municipal elections, and that people just knee-jerk vote for one side or another as they perceive that side.
But in 2007, when they had the campaign to change it to even year elections, someone did a study, and that doesn't happen in Santa Barbara. It's called drop-off or something like that.
Yes.
At the bottom of the ballot, it's like ballot fatigue. You're so tired, oh, I can't vote. People don't do that here. They'll vote for president, some statewide elections, and oh yeah, city council down at the bottom.
Well, I think the point I was trying to make was just being heard. So you as a relatively underdog candidate is running for city council. There's governor's race, there's a president's race, there's a state senator race, a U.S. senator race. There's all this publicity that's hitting the media, overwhelming everybody. How do you get your underdog message out? Whereas in off-year elections, it's a little bit more easy to be heard.
That's good. You just have to work hard. I think candidates should work hard to get elected, and they want it. They have more contact with the voters, and it's more meaningful when they're elected. So,
well, that's good. Okay, so if the city is doing a study, not just this demographic study about how the elections. Are they also doing a study about whether what the benefits would be of having district elections? Is that a part of the study? Or
no, it's more of a demographic study about who voted, and if we have racially polarized voting, that's what it's going to...
If the city decided on, when would be the earliest the city on its own could decide to have district elections and put it on a ballot?
November 2015, so next November.
So a year from
now. A year from November.
A year from this election?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the voters will, there'll be plenty of community forums, and people will be for it and against it. The League of Women Voters right now has convened a committee, and they're studying it, and they're very nonpartisan, and they do their homework, so I'm looking forward to what they have to say.
I'm aware. Well, I'm happy with the League of Women Voters. I'm happy that you came to talk to us today. I think it was a lot of information. I want to say thanks to Ali and Juanita and Tess in the studio that is back there diligently trying to get these cameras working and the audio right and the subscripts across the bottom, and thank you to TVSB. We will be showing this for 2 weeks. I'm not quite sure exact date, but I will send out my emails and let people know. And in any event, if anybody's interested and is watching it live on cable TV and wants to see it again, remind you it's on Ustream or on YouTube. Thank you.
Thank you.